There are 12 thoracic vertebrae, T1 through T12. There are 5 lumbar vertebrae, L1 through L5. So C1 through C7, meaning there are 7 cervical vertebrae. T1 through T12, 12 thoracic. L1 through L5, 5 lumbar. And then you have 5 bones fused to form the sacrum. And you have 3 to 4, some book says 3 to 5, bones fused to form the coccyx.
3 to 5, you said?
Yes. So you have the cervical vertebrae up here, you have the thoracic, and then this bone is the sacrum, 5 bones fused to form the sacrum, and 3 to 5 bones fused to form the tailbone or the coccyx. Let's go back to the cervical vertebrae. There are certain things that you use to distinguish the cervical vertebrae from the thoracic or from the lumbar. So let's look at some of the general features first, and then we'll come back to distinguish the cervical vertebrae. All of these vertebrae have a bone that goes forward. All cervical vertebrae have it. All thoracic vertebrae, all lumbar vertebrae have the general features. Spinous forward, and here's the transverse process. But now, how do we distinguish the cervical vertebrae? The cervical vertebrae has holes in the wings, which are known as the transverse foramen. The thoracic vertebrae has no transverse foramen, and also the lumbar vertebrae has no transverse foramen. So that's an important feature to distinguish the cervical from the other two. So here is an example of your cervical vertebrae. You do have the spinous process, you do have the transverse process, but you have 2 big holes, one hole and one hole, and that's called the transverse foramen. Here is the thoracic, no transverse foramen. Here is the lumbar, no transverse foramen. So the main feature to distinguish the cervical vertebrae is that they do have a transverse foramen. Got it? Thoracic don't have it, lumbar don't have it. So that's the main feature. Other feature to distinguish the cervical vertebrae, the spinous process tend to split into 2. So it's called the bifurcated spinous process, or just the bifid, F-I-D, spinous process. The thoracic vertebrae do not split, neither does the lumbar vertebrae split into 2. So it's usually, 2 features to identify, and by the way, not all of the cervical vertebrae is going to split, but most of them do split. So you have 2 things to identify. They must have a transverse foramen to be called a cervical vertebrae. That's a must. Some cervical vertebrae do have a bifid or bifurcated spinous process. So let's put that on the board. So looking for the transverse foramen, and sometimes they will have a bifid or bifurcated spinous process. Occipital condyle coming from the occipital bone, and it's going to sit right there on the superior articular facet that looks just like that. It's longer but narrow. So the axis, here is your spinous process, very pronounced, and it tends to split into 2. So on the test, if I tag any of the cervical vertebrae and it's split in 2, and if you say spinous process, you get 2 points. But if you remember bifid spinous process, you'll get an additional point, so you'll score 3 points instead of 2. Got it? So you'll get another point by remembering that it is called bifid spinous process. Now, so here is the axis now. You do have a superior articular facet that's going to meet with this facet here. But I'm not going to test you on that, not going to overload you. provided you can identify the axis that has the bifid spinous process, usually, and this now looks like a thumb sticking up, and that's called the dens or the odontoid process. The dens or the odontoid process is present on the axis. This is the dens. If this is the atlas, the dens comes up like that and goes right through that sleeve so that the skull sits on the dens that you can actually rotate your head. So provided you can identify two items on the axis, that is the bifid spinous process and the dens, you have it made. Remember now, it got to be a cervical vertebrae because what? It has a transverse process and it has a transverse foramen to make it a cervical vertebrae. So if this is on the test and you tell me cervical vertebrae, I'm giving you 1 point. Because now you have not told me that it is the axis, right? But the important features are there. The dens and the bifid spinous process. The dens in particular makes it, the dens or the odontoid process makes it the axis. Are we clear on that? Clear on how it's going to be tested? So we can check off the odontoid process for the dens. If you don't remember odontoid process, dens is accepted. So that's how you are going to be able to identify the atlas from the axis. Superior side. What bone is this?
Atlas.
Atlas. Are we paying attention over here? Atlas? Agree that it's the atlas? Hello? It's good to look at me and look at the bone. What is it? Atlas? Atlas, that's atlas. By the way, here is the transverse process with the holes in the transverse process to make it a transverse foramen. Here is the tubercle. That's the anterior tubercle, posterior tubercle, but very important. That would be what? Testable. What is it?
I just have a question. Like on the test, how are you gonna say you want us to define the transverse form? Are you gonna put a sticky like particular, or are you just gonna put a sticky on the whole thing and like ask us?
No, if I'm going to ask you for the foramen, I'd run a pin through there, and the pin would have the tag. If I'm asking you for this, the tag would be on here.
Okay.
If I'm asking you for here, what is this, by the way?
The tubercle? No.
Superior.
This is where the occipital condyle sits. So what is it?
Superior articular
Facet. Superior articular facet. Even if you say facet, I'll give you the full points because you're on the right track. Okay?
Okay.
If you don't say superior articular means that there's a joint going to form there. But if you can remember the word facet, I'll give you the 2 credit points. Okay?
Oh.
So now, you have to be recognizing the bone. If I turn it over, it's not the superior articular facet. This is the one that I said I'm not going to test you on.
That's anterior.
That is the inferior facet. The inferior facet is there. It looks different from this one. This one is more elongated. Looks like it's in 2 pieces.
Yeah.
So you have to make sure. Recognition is important in the lab. It's not so much memorizing it. It's being here and see what the instructors show you.
Yeah.
That is the facet. And we are now on the superior side. These are now called the tubercles. So I'll put it over there, make sure you take a picture. I'm putting it on the side that is testable. I'm not going to, what I test in the lab is not what, if I didn't discuss it, it's not going to be on the practical. Remember I told you I'm not going to put it on this side.
It's only going to be the superior.
This
side.
is showing you the inferior facet. I'm going to have it on this side, and that's on the superior side, right?
Yeah.
So make sure, everyone, make sure that you understand. It has the superior articular facet. It has a transverse process with a transverse foramen, and these are the tubercles.
So that's all we have to know.
The trichor's thumb, which is the dens. And on this side, The spinous process looks like it's split in two. So the bifid, if you say bifid spinous process, you get 3 points instead of 2. And here, still good. Here you have what the transverse process, and you have the holes in the transverse process. So that will be the transverse foramen. Hello, 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 miss over there.
Wait, is that the same thing? The transverse process and the transverse foramen?
Foramen.
Foramen is the whole.
Foramina or foramen is the same thing. It's a hole that is found in the transverse process. Makes it a cervical vertebrae.
Okay.
Are we on the same plane now?
Yeah.
Okay, so now what are the items on here that are testable? You have the bifid spinous process. First, identify the bone. It is the axis. And you know, just by the way, the vertebral foramen is getting smaller. As the spinal cord comes down, it tapers. Very wide in the axis area. So vertebral foramen, this is the dens, the transverse process with the transverse foramen, and got it?
So does the brain stem? I can't see it. Cervical.
Identify the bone. What would you say? Everyone on this table come around and tell me the answer. Identify the bone.
Cervical?
Yes. So this is the body of the bone, by the way. What did you get over there? Identify the bone. What would you call it? Cervical vertebrae. So listen very carefully now. If you have a bone like this on the test, and the question is, name the bone, all you're responsible for is to look for the features that we study here. And what are you seeing? The bifid spinous process, and you're seeing what? Transverse foramen. So it makes it what? A cervical vertebrae. You're not responsible to say whether it's C4 or C5, because they differ in size when you're going from one individual to the other. But definitely it's not C1, right? And it's not C2. So it can be any of the others. So you'd be correct if you say cervical vertebrae. You'll get your 2 points. Got it?
Cervical vertebrae.
Okay. This is the body of the bone. That is the body of the bone. Okay. Identify the bone or name the bone. And Miss Angela, I'm not getting your, what's your, Miss Graham, I'm not getting your full attention. You're forever looking in the book. You need to. Anyone from table 1, what is the bone?
Cervical vertebrae.
Table 2? Table 3? Same thing, cervical vertebrae. Don't guess and say C3 or C4, just what? Cervical vertebrae. Because it has, looks like it's going to have a bifid spinous process. Spinous process, not all, because we know that the atlas do not have a bifid spinous process. It has a tuber. But they must have what? Transverse foramen. Very good. That's how you're going to identify it. So we're finished with cervical vertebrae, the atlas and the axis. Bifurcated spinous process, the dens, superior articular surface, that is actually a facet. For the occipital condyle, it's a facet. So we can say superior facet. You're done with that, you get it right. And so you can put the word facet beside that. Transverse foramen, the coccyx, not going to be tested, and we know that 3 to 4, 3 to 5, some book says 5. Tiny bones that makes the tailbone or the coccyx. And now we go to the thoracic vertebrae. So here, cervical vertebrae, it has the spinous process, it has a transverse process, but remember, no holes, no holes. This is the body of the bone. You notice now that the vertebral foramen is getting smaller, but it has now, right here, it has superior articular facet, flat place to make a joint. So it has superior articular facet.
So would you say facet for that too?
Yes. So here we're on the thoracic vertebrae, and if they have a smaller one, then you can, usually it's at the side over here, and it's called the demifacet. So here is the superior articular facet, and down here is a smaller one, they call it the demifacet. That's where the ribs are going to be attached. So let's look at the thoracic vertebrae. So the thoracic vertebrae, so here is the spinous process going forward, transverse process, and you have the body of the bone. Right here would be a facet. So the flat part of the bone, it looks a little different from that because remember that's a drawing. So here's facet, here's another facet. And if we turn it on this side, that's the only facet that is there. Sometimes there's like over here, tiny little flat places, so that would be a demifacet. Here's a very nice facet, so it's pointing forward. This is a drawing. The real, this is the spinous process, transverse process, and these would be facets. So this facet is attached. The next bone will come right there so that you have a joint. So spinous process, this is a transverse process, and facets. And that's the body of the bone. This would be the thoracic vertebrae. You can see this is getting smaller, much smaller. The body is getting larger. So let's compare it with this one. Let's compare it with this bone. So what is this bone? So you can, what is this bone?
The atlas bone.
No?
Earth.
It has a spinous process, so it can't be an atlas, so what is it? Cervical vertebrae?
Yeah.
Cervical vertebrae, small one. Cervical vertebrae. It can't be atlas because it has a spinous process. Atlas will have a tubercle. And you see the body is very pronounced. And this is the thoracic vertebrae. So now the only thing on the thoracic vertebrae is to be able to identify the spinous process and also the transverse process, and you have the facet up there. The vertebral foramen is getting smaller, but guess what? The body of the bone is getting larger. So let's compare. Here is the lumbar. The body is getting larger. The body is getting larger. The body is much larger than the cervical. Also, we'll have the spinous process that's shorter, and the transverse process is also shorter, but the body is getting larger, and you also have facets. Any flat portion, flat rounded portion up there, that is a facet. So we can check off the lumbar vertebrae. You notice they didn't ask you anything special about the lumbar vertebrae, only to be able to identify it. See, it has a spinous process, it has a transverse process, the vertebral column, but look at the body is getting much larger. And any flat portion would be a facet, superior articular process, that's a process if it's not flat. When it's flat, it's called the facet. So this would be an example of a lumbar vertebrae. So here's the spinous process, transverse, you have facet, and the body of the bone is getting much larger.
So there's a process, not a facet.
So you have a process, but what they're not showing you, all you need it, or sometimes on top they have a flat portion right here, very flat, wherever it's flat, it's going to be facet. Okay, so now I'll put these out. The wing, so we can check it off the body. The transverse process, and the foramina, which is the whole. The vertebral foramen, which is right.
Now, why is it calling the facet?
What is this bone?
The thoracic.
So it's not the lumbar because the body is not that large, right? And usually for the lumbar, this is getting shorter, thicker but shorter, thicker but shorter. So this would be the thoracic vertebrae. Okay, so now, if I put my tag around there, what is that?
Pedicle.
The pedicle. If my tag goes here, The lamina. The lamina is the space between the transverse and the spinous process. The pedicle is between the body and the transverse process. So either of those will be on the test. Opposite direction, then it would be the inferior articular process. And so I'm not going to test it. Again, name the bone. Lumbar because it has a large body. This is the spinous process. These are the transverse process. And so this would be the flat portion, facet. But if I tag here, it would be what? It would be the articular process. And this is in the superior position. So it would be the superior articular process. But if I go right at top, it would be the facet. Superior facet. But the part that sticks out would be the process. The process carries the facet. Okay, so I'm not going to test you on because I'm not going to turn it over. I'm going to have it in the superior position, which is this way. If I turn it over, then it would be the inferior. So the inferior is underneath there. But I'll make sure that all the tests will be showing you in the superior position. So take off the inferior articular process and keep around there, articular process. If I go on top, it would be the facet. If you don't remember superior, inferior, that's good. That's okay. Providing you know it's an articular process and you know that the flat portion is the facet. That's acceptable. Okay, so what we're left there now is the... Okay, so what I'm going to do is, I know if sometimes Sandy or Tony or someplace else, and I'll make sure to leave the cabinets unlocked so that when you come in, and I tell the Thursday class, this is now example of a joint. So this is a vertebra. Here's another vertebra. This blue represents what? Running through spinal cord. And this is the intervertebral disc testicle. That's an example of a joint. So you have a vertebra, the blue that runs through with the spinal cord, and where the pin is would be the intervertebral disc. So the question would be, name the structure, time of the test, name the structure. It's what?
Intervertebral
disc. And what cartilage is it made up of? Fibro cartilage. So intervertebral disc, and I've shown that to you. And so we're finished with the general structure. We have looked at the centrum. We're going to look at the superior view, and here is now the posterior view, and here is the inferior view, or this superior anterior view. Okay, so here is the, name the bone, it is the sacrum. You have 5 fused bones form the sacrum.
5 fused bones to form the sacrum.
So I'm going to present the bone in this view, which is the posterior view. So to get the idea, posterior, so here is the back side, so that's the posterior view. Anterior view would be on this side. So we can say dorsal, posterior, or the dorsal view. So let's use the word dorsal because it makes sense. So here would be the median sacral crest. This is a crest, right in the middle of the bone. The median sacral crest. You don't see it on the opposite side, on the ventral or the anterior side. So here is the median sacral crest. When you turn it over, you can't see the crest, so you know you're on the back side. The median sacral crest right in the middle. And then the holes. So these are now the dorsal, sacral, foramen or foramina, the dorsal one. When you turn it over, you're seeing the ventral. And I'm not testing you on the ventral side, keeping it easy. So here is the dorsal side with the dorsal, sacral, foramen or the foramina. And here's the median sacral crest. And then now the other term that you have now is you have the superior articular surface or process. The surface would be flat. So now we're looking for the.
It's not a facet. Called a facet.
So here is the facet. The facet is a flat portion. The process is what sticks out. But we're asking now for the auricular surface. The auricular surface. So not that, the auricular surface. So here's a flat. So on the side, although it's not labeled, so here, let's go on the auricular surface. So along here, this is going to go against the oscox, say the ilium. So this is the auricular surface. Flat, auricular surface, the auricular surface. It's a facet, but because it fits along here, they're giving it a nice name, the auricular surface on the side. So the important things for this is name the bone. It would be the sacrum. This is the median sacral crest, and this would be the sacral foramen. So the dorsal is on the dorsal side. So the dorsal sacral foramen. This is the auricular surface on the side. Not going to overload you, so the items that I am going to hold you responsible for is the dorsal sacral foramen or foramina and the median sacral crest. So I'll take off the auricular surface. Very easy bone. Now, just a little testing, so we can get on your legs. Just a little testing over here.
Axis.
Come around and look at it carefully. Seeing is believing. Don't just jump to conclusions. Seeing is believing. Name the two bones.
The atlas and the axis. Transverse foramen.
Everyone in the class, look at it. And then you can go back to your seat.
Bifurcated spines.
Everyone see that one? Okay, so what's your answer? Have you seen it yet? You need to get around there, please. What are the other answers? What are you saying? Saying, what is it? What is it? Atlas and the, have you seen it? Have you seen it? What about Kelly?
Yes.
What is it?
Atlas and axis.
And guess what? Everyone is wrong. Look at it again.
No, that's got no
This one?
axis.
Number one and number two.
That's the atlas.
But it's got no
Oh,
axis.
but the second one
And
is.
There's
what
no
about the
axis.
second one?
No
That'd be the
axis. Cervical
subdurat
bone.
or cervical vertebrae.
Exactly. Check it out again.
I
See,
checked that
all
at the
over
beginning.
the vertebrae. So you,
Does
before
the
you even
atlas
look
touch
at it,
cervical
miss,
vertebrae?
hello,
In
Miss
that.
Peels, before
In
you
that.
even look at it.
Right here, yes.
Atlas and axis.
It's missing.
And that's wrong.
Axis, okay.
Okay, axis is correct
So
for
the
this one.
atlas and the
But for
axis?
this one, it was wrong.
It's just the axis. So why is the axis missing?
Atlas
The
and
axis
the
was put there for your purpose.
Oh, I was
To see
like,
whether you're
so
actually focusing. Wrong again.
how many pairs of true ribs?
7 pairs. So watch now. If you put 7, no, I didn't say that. I said how many true ribs?
Oh,
How many true? You can say 14 or what? 7 pairs. If now, I'm saying it very loudly, if you put 7 on the test, expect to get a point off.
so
Because it's
7
not
pairs.
7. It's 7 pairs.
Oh,
Make total of 14. So I'm warning you now. Don't put 7. Miss Peels, that's for you. Don't put 7 pairs or 14. Got it? So you might say, oh, she's very tough. But I've been telling you.
it's funny how you get on me, but everybody said axis.
What's that?
It's funny how you get on
And then you said, I put some axis. And I said, oh my goodness, this girl is not focusing. She's not looking at it.
Oh, she doesn't feel.
Yeah, I was saying axis and axis, not even when you put it down because I was thinking of somebody else.
Okay, I won't pick on you anymore. Okay, so I forgive you. I'm not saying pairs on the test. How many true ribs?
7 pairs.
14 or 7 pairs. How many false ribs?
5 pairs.
5 pairs. You must put the word pairs.
5 pairs
Or
of
if you're
false
going to
ribs.
say 14. Got it? I am warning you from now. Now, how many, what about the floating ribs? How many floating ribs?
2
Two
pairs.
pairs. 2 pairs.
What is a pair?
2 pairs. So again, you have 7 pairs of, and you can write down the number beside it. 7 pairs of true ribs and 5 pairs of floating ribs and 2 pairs of floating ribs. 2 pairs of floating ribs, 5 pairs of false ribs. But the 2 pairs of floating ribs are included in the false ribs. Got it? Hello, hello?
2 pairs of floating
2 pairs
ribs.
of floating ribs are included
In the false
in the
ribs.
5 pairs of false ribs. Got it?
How come this one is a false rib? Is it because there's a little connection there between the two?
So let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now pair 8 and 9 and 10 is connected into one piece of cartilage that carries it to the sternum.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one is a false rib. Is it because of this connection here? That
No,
makes
this is not false, this is true.
2, 3,
6 and then 7. And now pair 8
4, 5. Okay.
and 9 and 10 is joined together into one piece that's attached to this one that goes into the sternum. So pair 8 and 9 and 10, those are false, and then you have 11 and 12 part of the false because these are not coming to the sternum.
So
So pair 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now 8, 9, and 10 join to one piece that joins this and goes to the
I
sternum.
see like 7 and 8 are both false.
Okay, so now we're going to take now one individual rib and identify that rib. Rib, here's another rib, here's another rib. So now we have to identify parts of the rib. Check sheet. So here's a nice one to study. So you have the angle of the rib. So this is the head, by the way. That's the head of the rib up there. That's the head. So here is, right there would be the angle of the rib.
Which one? Sure.
So the head is there, the angle is right there where you have the curve. That's the angle of the rib. So the head, the angle. And then we're looking for the facets. So you have facets where it's, so here's the head, right on top. Here's the angle right up there. So here where it makes a curve, that would be the angle of the rib. So we're looking now for, here's a tubercle. This part, this is the head. If that's a head, that would be the neck. So the neck is right there, the head is there, the neck is there, the angle is there. And now this would be the tubercle. And right along here, the flat portion, flat, where you find in the flat portion, it's going to be a facet. So you have the head, the neck, the angle, the tubercle, and any flat portion here that goes towards the vertebra would be the articular facet, or the articular facet to make a nice joint. So the flat portion. So we go around that way. That's the head. The flat portion would be the facet part of the head. This is the neck. Here is the tubercle. That's the angle. So we can be checking off the parts. All of that is the shaft. True ribs, we know that's 7 pairs. And I've shown you the tubercle. So things that we're taking off. coastal cartilage. So look carefully now. 8, 9, and 10, false ribs that goes up. And 11 and 12, these are the floating ribs, part of the false. So these 3 plus 2 more make false ribs. Now, here is the coastal cartilage. The ribs are called coastal ribs. The cartilage is the coastal cartilage. Not testing you on coastal cartilage because you're not going to have the entire rib cage. So you can take off the term coastal cartilage. What we can also take off also is the intercostal space. So let's point that out to you. The ribs out there, just that sticks out is usually the tubercle. Anything that sticks out, tubercle, facet, flat, this is the neck, and the facet sits on the head. So the facet is always a flat portion for the process. Just like here,
Tubercle is a process.
alone, here, remember this is a tubercle. When it's larger, then it will be chain strand. It has a facet, flat portion. This is the neck, that's the tubercle. If you can see a flat portion on the tubercle, it becomes the facet. All of this is the shaft. And so now you have the sternum has 3 parts. 1 bone, but 3 bones are made up there. So here is the manubrium. The top portion is the manubrium. The middle portion is the body. And down here is the xiphoid process. So this name the bone, it is the sternum. But if I tag here, I'm looking for the, not the sternum, I'm looking for the manubrium. If I tag here, the body. If I tag down here, it's the xiphoid process. Now, here are some little notches up here, and this is called the clavicular notch. That's where the clavicle sits. So look carefully. Every part of the bone is important. So here's the sternum. Here's the manubrium, the body, the xiphoid process. This is the clavicle that comes in and sits right there. So this little notch is called the clavicular notch. Clavicular notch. And watch now. Each of these ribs come in and sit right there. So these would be what? Those are the coastal notches. So the coastal notches really belong to the word sternum. So see, they come in and they're attached to the sternum. So all of these notches would be the coastal notches. On top would be the clavicular notch. Zippy sternal joint? No, don't worry about that. Don't overload yourself. Here's a clavicle. First of all, it is thicker. Then the rib. So watch carefully now. One end is called the sternal end. One end is called the acromial end. Here is the scapula in the back. And this part of the scapula is called the acromion. That's the acromion. So one end of the clavicle sits on the acromion, so that's called the acromial end. And the other end goes right into that notch, and that's called now the sternal end. Sternal end and the acromial end. Here's the posterior view, that's the anterior view. One end, listen carefully now, you can make an imaginary triangle from one end. This is one side of the triangle. You make a line here to make another side, and this will be the third side of the triangle. So once you can make an imaginary triangle, that is the sternal end. And the other end is kind of a roughish. You can't make a nice triangle, that would be the acromial end. So you rule things in and you rule things out. Once you can make an imaginary triangle, this is one side of the triangle. Here's another side, here's the third side. That's the end that goes toward the sternum. That's the sternal end. And the other side, with the other end, would be the acromial end. Whether you turn it in the posterior view or the anterior view, you can still make an imaginary triangle. Fat, not thin. Here's another clavicle. Which which end would you consider to be the sternal end?
That one.
Which one you can make an imaginary triangle from?
The inside.
Which end?
The inside.
Inside. The one that's curved.
Okay, let's look at this one.
Yeah.
Which one you can make an imaginary, which end?
Medial.
Wait, what? What side are you saying?
Which one you can make an imaginary triangle from?
Isn't it
far
this side?
The far side.
Look at it carefully. Miss Graham.
This one over here.
That looks like the acromial and that looks like the sternal.
Which one? This one? Correct.
Yes.
This one.
Yeah, that's what I said.
Sternal,
Not
right?
this one.
Yeah.
One just has a little.
Which end? So this would be the sternal end. And opposite of sternal, this is the acromial end. So this one you can make an imaginary triangle from it. This would be the sternal end. Opposite of the sternal would be the acromial end. Anterior aspect. So I usually do like this. Watch carefully. Put the thumb in. So that is actually the acromion. That's the acromion. And my hand here becomes a spine. So we have to do things to get the student's attention. Thumb inside, that's the acromion. This becomes the spine of the scapula. So watch carefully. The spine of the scapula. So here it is. Thumb inside.
Oh.
This, the acromion.
What?
And right here becomes the spine of the scapula. So you have it. Items already. The acromion, and you have the spine. Okay, so now things that I'm going to take off because these are actually directional terms. Axillary or the lateral border, and the vertebral or medial border, but I need to show them to you. So the part, remember this is your axle? So the part of it, so the border that is closer to the armpit, that's called the lateral or the axillary border. Remember, the border that is closer to the vertebral column, more medial, so that would be the medial or the vertebral border. So if you're actually interested in knowing it, remember it's shaped like this, a V-shaped structure. So here, this one, here's the glenoid cavity. So the border that is closer to the glenoid cavity, that would be the axillary or the lateral border. And the border opposite would be the medial or the vertebral border. Got it? So the border that is close to the humerus sits to make a joint. So this would be the lateral or the axillary border. And opposite to that would be the medial border or the vertebral border, away from the glenoid cavity. So I'm not testing you on those two. Those are actually directional terms. So we can take off those two. But you must know where the glenoid cavity is. Here's the glenoid cavity. That's where the head of the humerus sits to make a nice joint. Again, here is this is the acromion, and you have the spine of the acromion. You're looking at it from the posterior view. When you're looking at it from the anterior view, you can't see the spine, and you're seeing just a portion of the acromion from this point of view. So we can check off the acromion, yes. Glenoid cavity, yes. Down here is the inferior angle. If you have an inferior angle, you must have what? A superior angle. Those are again directional terms. The bottom of the bone is the inferior angle. Above it is the superior angle. Those are directional terms. So we're going to take that off. Don't want to overload you. So we take off the inferior angle and the superior angle. And if you have a superior angle, you're going to have a superior border. And we already discussed the lateral border and the medial border. So you have the superior angle and you have also the superior border. We're taking that off too. So take that off.
Superior border and what?
And the superior angle. Take that off. Angle.
Superior border.
Okay, so you take that off. So you're left now with some important things. So now, I told you that this is the acromion, this is the spine, and the hitchhiker's thumb would be the coronoid process. So the coracoid process. Hitchhiker's thumb, so like this, that is the acromion, this is the spine, hitchhiker's thumb is the coracoid process. Here is the coracoid process, which is called the hitchhiker's thumb. So let's show it to you over here. Very important. So again, here's the acromion, here's the spine. We already took off these and took off the angle. We kept the glenoid cavity. This in front, hitchhiker's thumb, that's the coracoid process. Coracoid process is important. Glenoid cavity is important. The acromion is important. The spine is important. Got it? Now, you have the mandibular condyle, the rounded portion that goes up to make the joint, the TMJ, remember, testicle. And you have another one that is not rounded, it's pointed, and that would be the coronoid, N-O-I-D process. So remember that spelling is important. This one is a coracoid, C-O-I-D process. Got it? Coronoid, to remind you, let's look around here.
Isn't it around the ulna?
The mandibular condyle to go up and make the joint, TMJ. Here's the pointed portion. This is the coronoid process. Here's the mandibular notch. We went across this already. Now when we come to the scapula, you have the coracoid process, C-O-I-D. So be careful now with your spelling. Noid is on the mandibular.
Is there a coronoid process on the ulna?
Coronoid process, yes. So, but I'm comparing because we haven't reached the ulna yet. So now, here's the acromion. Here is we took off all the angles. Here's the spine, and we took off all those. Now here's the coracoid process, which is the hitchhiker's thumb, and you have the glenoid cavity above. Now, here's a notch. Here's the notch. So let's get the, not let it go that far to ask you whether it's right or left. Okay, identify the bone. What is it? Scapula. The part of the bone.
Acromion.
The acromion, part of the bone. The spine, part of the bone. Coracoid process. Here's a notch. This is the scapular notch. You don't have to say suprascapular. Scapular notch. That's the scapular notch. We're not worried about the angles. I already told you once you can find the glenoid cavity. This one would be under the armpit, so this would be the axillary or the lateral border. Opposite would be the medial or the vertebral. This is the inferior spine, and you have the superior spine up there. But very important now, all of this is under the underside of the bone. So subscapular fossa. A fossa is a place where muscles are going to be laid down. So we should be able to identify here. This is under the bone, and so this would be the subscapular fossa. The subscapular. Where is it? Subscapular. Sub means below, subscapular fossa. So here it is, subscapular fossa. Got it? And now, the anterior view. So here's the spine. So above the spine would be what? Supraspinous fossa. And below the spine would be what? Inferior spinous fossa. Again, those are important landmarks. Because that's why we study the bones before we go to the muscles. Supraspinous fossa, above the spine, supraspinous fossa, below the spine, infraspinous fossa. Underside of the scapula, subscapular fossa. Got it? So those clavicle, that's a clavicle. And see where now the ligament is taking it to put it at that part of the bone. So it goes into the acromion, part part of the bone, and now identify the part of the bone. First of all, this is what bone is this? Scapula. Part of the bone. Acromion, part of the bone. Above here would be what?
Subscapularis.
Supraspinous fossa. Below it would be what? Infraspinous fossa. And now looking on the underside, that would be what? Subscapular fossa.
Wait,
You
that's
have a
the
nice muscle that is laid down there. Fossas are placed on the bones where muscles are going to be laid down. So we'll be studying this nice muscle here, which will be subscapular muscle, lays down in the fossa, subscapular fossa. So this demonstrated very well. Here a great that projects out, that's the deltoid tuberosity. So we can check that off. Here again is the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle. This is the only bone that has greater and lesser tubercle. We saw tubercles on bones, but you don't see greater and lesser. So the larger one is a projection, greater tubercle, lesser tubercle. And here in between is a groove, and that's called the intertubercular groove. So we can check off greater and lesser tubercle and the intertubercular groove in between. So you're seeing the greater tubercle and the lesser tubercle, and in between is the intertubercular groove. So again, the head, anatomical neck, the greater tubercle, the lesser tubercle, the intertubercular groove. So we can check that off. Down. So now going down to the end of the bone. So in this view, you see a rounded wheel, and that is the capitulum. The rounded wheel is the capitulum, and this one that is not rounded, that's called the trochleus. So the capitulum and the trochleus. Capitulum and the trochleus. So this is the rounded one, the capitulum. This one that has a little point, that is the trochleus. Now, so we can check that off. The trochleus and the capitulum. That is from this point of view. The capitulum, rounded wheel, the capitulum. Sorry, the capitulum, rounded wheel, the trochleus, pointed. So now turn the bone over. So now you're looking now at the anterior part, the posterior part of the bone. So you notice that there is a deep fossa right here. That's a fossa. And that's called now the olecranon fossa. This is the olecranon fossa that sits right there. And on the other side of the bone, you have another little fossa, and that is called now the coronoid fossa. The coronoid fossa, the olecranon fossa. So let's see how these bones fit together. Are found in the lower arm or the forearm. This is the ulna, and this looks like the old-fashioned, not the electric, the old-fashioned can opener. So this is the olecranon process. The olecranon process, top of the can opener, that sits right in there to make a nice elbow joint we were talking about today, the hinge joint. So the olecranon process, top of the can opener, sits right in here in the olecranon fossa to make a nice joint. And this part out here, this is the coronoid process that comes around, and remember this doesn't fit together, that's supposed to come right up here to sit in the coronoid fossa. So the olecranon process sits in the olecranon fossa. This is the coronoid process that comes around and sits in the coronoid fossa. Makes sense? So we can check it off. So we're done with the humerus. So again, identify the bone, it's the humerus. Here is the head. Here is the anatomical neck. You're not responsible for the cervical neck. You're responsible for the greater tubercle, lesser tubercle, the intertubercular groove in between, then the deltoid tuberosity down here, deltoid tuberosity. So you go down the shaft of the bone here at the very end, and then you come now to the rounded, that's the capitulum. The more pointed is the trochleus. This right on top is a coronoid fossa. On the other side is the olecranon fossa. Two items that we haven't accounted for, out here and out there. So look carefully now. On this side you can see, out here, and on this side a little bit down smaller. Those are called epicondyles. Epicondyles are places where muscles or ligaments are going to be attached. Epicondyle, epicondyle. So look where the head is flowing now. Remember, you can't lift up the bone at the time of the test. So the bone is laid down, and where the head is moving to, that would be the medial epicondyle, head turns in. And on the other side will be the lateral epicondyle. So look carefully where the head is flowing. So here's the head. Follow the head. Medial epicondyle, head is turned in to make that shoulder joint. The medial epicondyle, opposite will be the lateral epicondyle. So that's the humerus. So we covered the anatomical neck. Here are the epicondyles, the medial epicondyle, the lateral epicondyle. So we look at the capitulum, the coronoid fossa, the deltoid tuberosity, greater and lesser tubercles, the head, intertubercular groove, the lateral and medial epicondyles, smaller bone is the radius. The head is very flat. So let's look at the, and this one is the ulna. The neck is here, that's the radial tuberosity. All along here would be the shaft of the bone, and you go all the way down to the bottom. And here now it looks like you're off the floor. This is the heel raised off the floor and the toes are pointed. And so that becomes a styloid process. You have to use things to remember, to remind yourself. So the head, the neck, the radial tuberosity, the shaft of the bone, and this looks like the toes pointing to the floor, and that becomes the styloid tuberosity. So table number 1, the neck, the radial tuberosity, and the styloid process. So it looks like the neck, the radial tuberosity, the shaft, the styloid process. Got it? And so again, this time the head is down below. For this one, the head is up here. This one, the head is down below. The head of the ulna. And look, you have a very pointed but small spinous process. Here's this one, can't miss it. The head is here, that's the styloid process. Bone up and down, shaft of the bone is there. This already point out, that's the olecranon process that sits in here. Olecranon process that sits in olecranon fossa. This is a coronoid process that goes around, sits like this to go into the fossa. So it goes together. The coronoid process. So you're using the same coronoid process on the ulna. Found it also on the mandible, N-O-I-D. Coid is found on the scapula. And then you have the olecranon process. And between here, this is the semilunar notch. So the semilunar notch looks like half of the moon. It's between there. Semi-lunar notch. So again, very easy bone. Here is the ulna. Olecranon process, coronoid process, the semilunar notch, the shaft of the bone, the head is down there, the styloid process. That is the ulna. This one again is the radius, the head, the neck, the radial tuberosity, the shaft, styloid process. Okay, so now, how many bones that makes up the carpus? How many bones make up the palm of the hand or the metacarpals? 5. And then we come to the phalanges. Here, you don't have to know the names of the 8 bones, but these are the 5 metacarpals. And down here you have now the phalanges. We can call them the digits. So we can call them the digits. So starting from the thumb, so this is digit number 1, digit number 2, digit number 3, digit number 4, digit number 5. It's easier. Smaller word, D-I-G-I-T. So this would be proximal bone. Watch carefully now. Proximal, and then you have what? A distal bone. This is digit number 1. Proximal and distal. Remember, these are the metacarpals. This is digit number 2, proximal, middle, and distal. Digit number 3, proximal, middle, and distal. Number 4, proximal, middle, and distal. Digit number 5, proximal, middle, and distal. So if the test is here, let's see what would be your answer. If I tag that bone, what would be your answer?
Middle.
Starting off with digit.
1, 2, 3, 4. Digit number 4.
Middle bone, right? Digit number 4, middle bone. If I do this one,
Digit number 2, distal.
distal bone. Okay, so that's how the test. So this is now the foot. So now you have 7 bones in the ankle. And we should know the largest bone is called the calcaneus or the heel bone. If you don't remember calcaneus, heel bone. And the second largest is called the talus, T-A-L-U-S. Now, these are the metatarsals. Again, digit number 1, digit number 2, digit number 3, digit number 4, digit number 5. So again, if I tag that, what would be the answer?
Digit number 1, medial.
1 proximal.
Right.
Digit number 1, proximal
Proximal.
bone. If I tag this bone,
Digit number 5.
distal bone. So that's how the test will be. You will have either.
You wouldn't say metatarsal? You would just-
No, these are metatarsals.
Oh.
These are metatarsals.
Tarsals. You
So we
wouldn't-
can't say
Tarsals is up here.
We can't say phalanges.
You can say phalanges, but the word digit is smaller, easier to remember too. These are the tarsals. In the sole of the foot, the metatarsals. Down here, these are the phalanges or the digits. I use digit because it's easier to remember, easier to spell. Got it? Now you should be able to identify the heel bone. Heel bone or calcaneus. Supposed to be able to identify it by itself.
Whoa.
Isn't it calcaneus? Talus.
Calcaneus.
Uniform.
The second largest is the talus. That's the one that gives the instep. The largest is your calcaneus or the heel bone.
Is
I
it
don't
talus?
have the talus. Patella or the kneecap.
Patella. Or kneecap.
Between the 2 bones. And this is showing you, here's the acetabulum. The nut is down in there where the head of the femur sits. And this is the pubic symphysis, where you have the fibrocartilage comes and meet with the 2 pubic bones. So that's showing you a very nice joint right there. Pubic symphysis. Because now this is more slender. And we have also the female model where the hips are a little bit wider. This is testable because it's a nice joint right there. And you have the intervertebral disc. You see that? Where the head goes inside there, it goes directly into the notch. So you have 2 of these together. That's the pubic symphysis, right? The one in the back, it's the ischium. If I type the one in the front, it's going to be the pubis. So 3 bones make up the, so we can check out pubic symphysis because I showed you. I'm looking for os coxae or half of the pelvic girdle or the coxal bone. You have a choice if I didn't touch the bone. But if I tag here, I'm looking for the word what? Ilium. If I go now to this bone, I'm looking for ischium. If I come in front, I'm looking for pubis. So you have to be careful what bone, because there are 3 bones that makes up this big bone.
So the pubis is more towards like the inner part.
The pubis is in front. This part is the pubis.
Okay.
The bone in the back is ischium. Okay, so now, some things we're taking off because they're positional terms, so we're going to take that off. So here is, we're looking for the spine of the bone. So you have the sciatic notch is found on the ilium, associated with the ilium. What do you think is passing through there? Sciatic nerve. So the greater sciatic notch is there. So for this bone, identify the bone, tag it, which will be the ilium. Here is the iliac crest. You have the iliac fossa, both sides, and you have the greater sciatic notch. We take off all of the directional anterior and posterior iliac spine. So now we go down to the ischium. So here's the ischium. You can see where there is actually a little suture right there telling you it's 2 different bones. Remember, this is the acetabulum, and the notch is right down in there. Acetabulum with the notch. So now we're down here. And so now you have the ischium, so identify the bone. The bone in the back is the ischium. Am I going to the right side? Okay. So the bone in the back is actually the ischium. So here's the ischium. And you have a spine right here. And that's called the ischial spine. So let's see where we are. Spine of the ischium. So here's the spine of the ischium. And then you have a notch below the spine. So that will be the lesser sciatic notch. So watch carefully. You have the greater sciatic notch up there. You have the ischial spine, part of it is broken. And then the lesser. So it shows you here the greater sciatic notch, the spine, and then now the lesser sciatic notch. So again, this is the ischium. This is the ischium. And then you have a nice tuberosity. And that is the ischial tuberosity. Here is the ilium. Here is the greater sciatic notch. Here is the ischial spine, part of it is broken, should be like that. Then below it you have a lesser sciatic notch, and right there this is the ischial tuberosity. Ischial tuberosity. And so this is the ischium. You see there is a nice little suture that tells you that this is one bone separate from this bone. This bone in the front now becomes what? Pubis. That's the pubis in front. So here's the ilium, here's the ischium. Keep in mind with the ischial, here is the lesser sciatic notch, the greater sciatic notch. Once you see the notch, you know you're on the side to become the ischium. Here is the lesser sciatic notch, the ischial tuberosity. And now here is the obturator foramen. Obturator foramen, that means that you have muscles, not muscle, nerves and blood vessel passing through, and you're left with the pubis. So nothing particular about the pubis except that you have the pubic symphysis in front. So if we look at this one, again you're having the ilium, the crest, the fossa, and you'll have the acetabulum, the acetabular notch, and you should have now a nice spine out here. So here you have the lesser sciatic notch, the greater sciatic notch, the ischial tuberosity, the obturator foramen, and the pubis is in front. So the pubis is just a small bone in front, nothing particular except that you're going to have the pubic symphysis joined right there. So we can check off the head, and we can check off very important things, and that is the very large, the greater trochanter, and the lesser trochanter. Greater trochanter, lesser trochanter. So we can check that off, the greater and lesser trochanter. We can also check off the intertrochanter crest. So here is the greater trochanter, the lesser trochanter, and this would be the crest between the two, the intertrochanteric crest. So again, greater trochanter, lesser trochanter, and here is the intertrochanteric crest in between. That's the head there, and if you have a head, you should have a neck. So here's the neck. That's the neck there. Greater trochanter, lesser trochanter, intertrochanteric crest. And then going down, here is the patellar surface. That's where the patella is going to sit, the kneecap. So we can check that off. Here is the shaft of the bone up and down. That's a shaft. So we can check that off also. The linea aspera is here. So right on top of the bone, that's where muscle is going to be attached. That's the linea aspera. You can see a marking along the bone. That's the linea aspera. So it's similar to a tuberosity. Okay, so now, very interesting. So we can take off the we can not take it off, check off the intertrochanteric crest. And now this part of the bone, two big wheels telling you that joints are going to be formed there. These are the condyles. Condyles. So you have the medial condyle, and you also have the lateral condyle. So again, watch for the direction of the head. Wherever the head is going, the head turns inwards, just like here. The head turns inward. So where the head is moving, this would be the medial condyle, and this would be what? The lateral condyle. So you have to see how the head flows. You can't lift up the bones. See where the head is running. So along here, the medial condyle, the lateral condyle. And if you have condyles, you also have epicondyles. So these are the outside of the bone. So here, a little projection on the lateral side, so that would be the lateral epicondyle, and here would be the medial epicondyle. So the round wheels are the condyles, and the projections on the side would be the epicondyle. So here, these are the condyles, fossa. So here's a fossa in between. Between the two condyles, you have the intercondylar fossa. And the slender one is the fibula. So let's look at the tibia. We're winding down. So the top, it's a medial bone, so therefore it will have the medial epicondyle closer to the framework of the body, and the opposite side would be the lateral epicondyle. So, and what is usually testable right in the middle, testable item on here, favorite, is the top of the bone is this one. And this is, so here now, this is the head, that's the shaft, and again looks like you're off the heel, and this is pointing to the floor, and so this becomes the lateral malleus. The head is up there, and this is the lateral malleus, and that's it.